Everybody, hope you are having an absolutely wonderful, fantastic, fantabulous, great day. I'm really happy to be talking to you about the rules of procedure for a Model UN committee. So this is actually a really important topic because it is a little bit banal to talk about the rules and structure and all of that, but knowing these things really makes you a step ahead of a lot of the people in committee who might not be as familiar with these types of things, and also gets you engaged because you have an idea of really what's going on and you're really prepared to do a good job in committee. So I hope that you've been enjoying these videos and that they have been helpful to you, because I have had fun making them. So without further ado, let's get started. Parliamentary procedure. Woohoo. So parliamentary procedure is, it's honestly not crazily difficult, unlike what they say over here, especially if you keep this page with you. I would highly recommend printing out, this particular page and perhaps the other articles that I've been going off of and talking about, and keeping it with you during MUN, as a resource for yourself. So just really quick, so it's not too difficult. Just print out the sheet and keep it with you. So the chair is the one who approves and dismisses points and motions. It's the chair who has the say when it comes to any of these motions or things that you're putting forth. Committees will follow the parliamentary procedure that's outlined below. And outside of General Assembly committees, so for those of you who are doing specialized committees or who are doing committees that are, crisis or cabinet, the procedure might be slightly different, but I think a lot of you guys are familiar with crisis procedure anyway. So looking over here, we have the pointer motion, the purpose, and then there are some motions for which you need to have speakers for or against. And then this is the pass ratio that's required. And this is whether or not you can interrupt the speaker during this thing, and any special notes that have to do with that particular motion. So for example, for appeal to the chair's decision, it's like, refrain from using this. Don't use this unless you really think there's a terrible error, or you need to submit this in writing. You can't just get up and say, I disagree with you, Chair. So like little notes like that for certain things. So I am not going to read this entire list to you. That would be painful. I might come back to some of these when discussing overall committee structure and timeline, and mention them as we go. But you can definitely look through this, and it will be very helpful. So this is the whole yielding thing. So if you have the right to speak on an issue for some time and you finish before time is called, you can yield your time to the chair, in which case the time is just gone. You can yield your time to questions, meaning that other people can ask you questions. You can yield it to another member state. So let's say you're talking about an issue and you want some other member state to back you up for whatever reason, and you finish early and you're like, okay, Togo, talk about this issue, and tell them why it's important, or whatever. Or you wouldn't say that, but you would say, I yield my time to, Togo, or I yield my time to Japan, or I yield my time to whoever, and you would give it to them. Or you can yield it to comments, for other people to raise their placards and make comments about what you have said. And the person who has gotten the yielded time cannot yield time while they're speaking. Otherwise, that would be like an infinite thing of yields, which would be pretty ridiculous, of smaller amounts. So let's see. So yeah, speakers may not yield during moderated caucus or procedural debate. So typical flow of committee. So I think this is extremely important to be aware of, because otherwise it's very easy to get lost if you don't know where the committee is going or what is happening. So this is actually really nice that they've put this out for people to look at. I'm sorry, this is rotated. There we go. So you have roll call, where all the countries are roll called and delegates can say present or present and voting. So if you just say present, you have the right to abstain during a vote. if you say present and voting, you must vote for everything that is being voted upon. So you cannot abstain. So that's why most people will say present. I think saying present makes more sense because you might as well not limit your options, and I think that's a good idea. I mean, if you really want to, you can say present and voting, but I don't see the purpose in that really. So adopting the agenda, it requires a simple majority vote. So you motion to, adopting the agenda is really like, what issue are we going to talk about? So you have a motion to open the speakers list. So the speakers list is one where, people raise their placard and the chair selects countries and creates an order in which they may speak. If a delegate is not selected initially when the speakers list is open, then they can send a list to the chair, and the chair will add them to the list. So then the delegates on the speakers list can go one by one and speak. But first, there's a motion to set the speaker's time. So the delegates set the time. So they decide like, okay, each of the speakers can speak for 1 minute, can speak for 3 minutes, can speak for whatever amount of time. Then you have the motion to set the agenda. While discussing agenda possibilities, a delegate may move to set the agenda. So you can say, so if I'm Japan, I can say Japan moves to set the agenda at topic A, then topic B. Because blah, blah, blah. Topic B is so important to the world because for whatever reasons. Let's say topic B is food scarcity. Food is, what people need to survive, and right now we have an issue where the amount of food we're producing is not enough for blah, 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 and for this reason we need to talk about this issue first before we get to the issue of inequity in housing. Let's say the other issue is inequity in housing. You're like, okay, we're talking about food first, not inequity in housing, because it's a bigger problem. Here's how we've addressed the problem in Japan, and we think it's really important to have this time right now to maybe try to create a similar solution for the world or whatever. So this is where you really can talk a little bit about yourself, introduce your country a little bit and their views, and also kind of set the agenda and, you move to set the agenda at a certain thing. And then eventually the committee will vote on a preferred topic order. So the overall committee, after hearing a lot of people speak and hearing people speak about what issues they want to debate in what order, then everybody will vote. It's critical to try to get the issue that your country has more to say on to be the one that you talk about. I mean, obviously it's a little bit out of your control, but if you get the chance to speak, say, let's adopt this issue, and it should be the issue that you have more to talk about because it will help you for the rest of the committee. Then after you adopt your agenda, you open a speakers list on the topic. You can do that. You can motion for a moderated caucus in order to debate the issue, which is usually, from what I've seen, what happens because, you have a more informal level of debate here, and it's a little bit easier to, just kind of go back and forth and not back and forth, you can't really do that in a moderated caucus, but it's just generally easier to run a moderated caucus than it is to, just go down a speakers list because people can kind of put up and down their placards at will and decide, I want to speak now, and then they can put up their placard and get called on very easily rather than, kind of a cumbersome thing of establishing a speakers list. So that's one thing. So if the motion for moderated caucus passes, the chair will depart from the speakers list and call it delegates on his discretion. So that's what I was saying right there. So the chair can just call on people if the motion for a moderated caucus passes. I highly encourage moderated caucuses as opposed to the speakers list because also it's more similar to the crisis format that you might be used to. Then you can also motion for an unmoderated caucus. Okay, they spelled it as unmoderated. That's kind of funny. Okay, motion for an unmoderated caucus for this many minutes. So you can motion to have an unmoderated caucus where you can informally talk about topics, work on actually writing working papers, and build coalitions. Okay, so the key thing here is once people have had a chance to introduce themselves through the speakers list, and they've set their speakers time, and they've set an agenda of topics, and then maybe once they've had a moderated caucus or two to discuss the topic, it starts to become a little bit evident, who believes in what and what countries are in line with your views or not in line with your views. And you should also know a little bit of this from doing research beforehand about what countries agree or disagree with you on your positions. So because of this, you kind of have this idea, right? So then you can have an idea of, okay, who do I want to form a block with? So what you see then after this beginning debate, you start to see like people passing notes to each other to say, hey, do you want to like work on a working paper together? Or hey, what do you think of this idea? And then people will start to break off into blocks, and usually there will be 3 or 4 major blocks, BLOCS, that form that each are working on a separate working paper and submitting it to become a draft resolution. So you kind of need to choose your block wisely. Choose one where you'll be respected and where you think you'll work well with people and make good contributions, and also one that's very much in line with the character of your country. I can't overstress that enough. You need to be in character. So go and be in character. Don't, like, for example, if it's a committee on Syria, Russia and the US should not really be on a block together. That doesn't really make very much sense. So it's just kind of critical to understand the issues well enough that you get when things like that don't make sense. So during the unmoderated caucuses are where you start to really solidify these blocks and where you start to, start writing these papers together. Then you submit and present the working papers, submit them to the dais, to the people sitting up front, to the chairs, and then at the chair's discretion, the working papers. So some of the working papers might need to be merged in order to meet, in order to meet a certain count, because maybe you don't want to, be debating like 10 different draft resolutions. So maybe you'll merge some of them that are kind of similar, so delegates might have to merge. Sometimes our chairs will be like, hey, I think you guys should merge, because you guys kind of have, like, I think that it would work well if you guys merged, and you can talk about it and merge and all of that. And then you can submit and present, and then the committee moves into voting procedure on those draft resolutions as to which ones they want to actually adopt as actual UN resolutions. So how to move into voting procedures. So somebody has to motion to close debate, to say, we're done, we've looked at all these resolutions, we're going to start voting. And you need to have 2 speakers who are against, who are against the motion. So if I say I motion to close the debate, 2 people have to say why you shouldn't close the debate. Like, oh, there's still this problem, or oh, we still need to discuss this issue. And then, after those 2 people speak against it, you need to have a 2 to 3 majority vote in order to have that motion to close debate pass. So then the body moves into voting procedures. Doors are shut. People cannot enter or exit the room. You cannot pass notes, etc. Normally, passing of notes is allowed, so you can't do this during voting procedure. Then there's an expiration of the speaker's list. So you have to pass the motion to close the speaker's list, so no more names can be added. Yeah. And then during the voting procedure, you can motion to divide the question, where you can ask for certain operative clauses. Like if there's some operative clause you don't like, you can say motion to divide the question, to remove that operative clause and vote upon it separately from the rest of the resolution. Like, I like the rest of this resolution, but this operative clause I don't feel makes sense. So like, let's say it's one on Syrian refugees. And there's one clause that says, Turkey recommends that the countries surrounding Syria invest money in the formation of refugee camps. And it's like, you're Turkey, and you're like, I don't have the money to do that. I don't want to invest in them. I want just to rely on international aid as is recommended by the rest of the resolution. I don't want to have to chip in at all. And you're like, divide the question. I want that to be voted upon separately from the rest of the resolution, which I like. So the delegate proposing this motion must name the clause to be questioned. The chair can call 2 speakers, so 2 people who are for and 2 people who are against. And then the body votes on whether the clause will be divided, 2/3 vote. And if this passes, the body votes on whether the clause should be included in the full resolution after the resolution is passed. So then you would have 2 votes, okay? Then you have roll call vote, where each country is called out loud and each member replies yes, no, or abstain. If you said present and voting, you can't abstain. If you said present, you can abstain. And so you can motion for a roll call vote, I think. I don't know if that's normally that they do a roll call vote or if you can motion. So that I'm not totally sure. I'm just going to be frank with you there. And then you can do yes or no with rights vote. A delegate can explain a vote while voting. Okay, so usually I guess it's roll call normally. And a delegate can explain why they're voting the way they are when voting during a roll call. If you want to clarify a vote against normal country policy. So if for some reason you're voting for a resolution that doesn't agree with what your country would normally do, you might say, I am still voting for this because I believe in the rest of it, besides this thing, and I think that the rest of it must be passed. Or I am voting for this because I have come to see that, now economic changes, within my country will be catalyzed through different means. I've come to realize that these other things will help our country grow, so therefore we don't need this other thing, or, like whatever it is. So clarify why you're voting the way you're voting if, you want to clarify a vote against normal country policy. So the request must be submitted in writing to the chair prior to voting. So if you're going to vote against your normal country policy, you need to submit in writing to the chair before voting, I would like to vote yes or no with rights. And then the chair, if they feel like, okay, that's appropriate, you can speak, they'll let you do that. So order of procedure: first, vote on amendments, like look at amendments, then division of the question, whether to divide the question. I don't know why it's doing that. And then the resolution as a whole. So that's what you got. Why does it keep on doing that? Jeez. There we go. So conduct during voting procedure. Once voting procedures have begun, you cannot caucus in any form. You can't talk with other people. You can't send notes to other people. None of that. Otherwise, you'll be kicked out of the room. And the only interruption to voting will be for a point of order concerning the actual voting procedure. So if you motion for a point of order, if you have a question or an issue about the actual voting procedure, then you can interrupt. But honestly, you probably won't, so it'll be fine. But otherwise, you cannot interrupt the voting procedure. Nobody will enter or exit the committee room until voting procedures have come to a close, and then you can close debate. So either the committee can move on to the next topic, which is honestly, from my experience, rarely the case. This is why it's so important to try to advocate for a topic where you'll have stuff to say. Please don't make the mistake of thinking that both topics will be debated because both were listed and you had to write papers on both. That is absolutely not the case. Only one topic is normally debated because of how long people can spend talking about it and how long it takes to write the draft resolutions and to do everything. So the committee will normally close debate because time has expired. So keep that in mind. So English is the language, attire, Western professional business attire. To maintain decorum, so no misconduct. Okay, so this is interesting. Okay? So for all electronic devices are strictly prohibited during committee sessions per WAMUNC policy. Typed resolutions will not be considered by the chair except in international bodies committees. So this is a very key thing. I'm very glad I came across this because this is a policy that varies from conference to conference, but their policy is unless you are in dissect, socium, secpol, or legal, you can't use a laptop. If you're in dissect, socium, secpol, or legal, you may use a laptop to draft your resolution. However, in even those committees, the laptops may only be used outside the committee room for typing. Remember to use your own USB drive as internet access is not permitted. So internet access is not permitted even if you have the right to use a laptop, okay? So you want to bring a USB drive so you can share the document with people and work on it collectively because you will not have access to the internet during the committee session, and you're not allowed to access the internet. So even if you got your phone, you can't access the internet. That's not allowed. So unless you're in dissect, socium, secpol, or legal, no laptops in general. If you are in one of those committees, then the guidelines that are listed here. So here's a list of motions. Please look at the list of motions within the context of the overall procedure and, when you might use them. So think about that. The main ones being, motion to open the speakers list at the beginning and to set the speaker's time at the beginning, then to set the agenda at the beginning. Those are all at the beginning. Then motion for moderated and unmoderated caucuses are happening during the committee, and also you can open a speakers list on various topics. So you can have a motion to open a speakers list on a specific topic if you'd like, I believe. And then towards the end, you have the, you can motion to close debate and move into voting procedure. You can have this motion, and then once you're in voting procedure, you can motion to divide the question. You can motion to do all those things. Oh, before you move into voting procedure, obviously you need to motion to introduce your draft resolutions. Once you've given them to the chair, then you can, after all the draft resolutions have been put forward and debated and all of that, you can, motion to close debate. You can motion to divide the question. You can do all of those things, and then you can actually vote and all of that. So that's an overview of the whole thing. The big thing is the formation of blocks, and then within those blocks, people becoming leaders and kind of instructing everybody else in terms of how to write those working papers and working with other people to write those working papers. So you really want to try to become a leader within your block and contribute significantly to your working paper and to the defense of your working paper and to try to get it passed. So that's kind of the overall goal. So thanks for listening, guys. I think this is my last video. Maybe there's one more, but I hope that these have been helpful and that you have a better idea of what to expect from General Assembly Committee, and also our mock committee will hopefully be helpful in that regard as well. So until next time, have a good one.